I recognize a lot of the crud that's happening in our world. I recognize some of the injustices and inequities. But I choose to show up on the positive side of the optimism ledger, right? Because by showing up, I'm saying to people, I actually have hope that we can make a difference.
Welcome back to Case Studies. I'm here with a longtime friend,
Yeah.
almost 20 years now, really long.
A while.
Yeah, longtime friend, Kyle Reyes. And this originally came about kind of after we did the interview with Astrid.
Yeah.
And we got an invite up to the commencement speech and the graduation. And it was nostalgic for me. UVU is where I started my personal journey.
Yeah.
And it was really special, for all the reasons. I played baseball there for a little while, met my wife there. Ultimately, it was kind of a kickoff to, we never left. We never left Utah County. And it was when that university was switching from kind of a community college to a full-scale university. And coming back 20 years later, it was just, I've been blown away by what it is today versus what it was then. And you've been right in the middle of that. And so I've had a bunch of things that I've wanted to talk to you about since that time. But yeah, maybe we just jump right into it. So talk to me, about yourself. So family, kids.
Yeah.
Where did it all begin?
Well, look, I grew up in Southern California in the San Fernando Valley area. My mom from the Big Island of Hawaii, my dad from the Philippines. She was an educator. My dad was an artist. And so you'll see those themes kind of run throughout my life because I started out kind of as a distracted artist. I wasn't great at school. I would be the kid doodling on the side when the teacher was talking. I got into graffiti art. I still actually do that. My sons are now participating. They do murals and stuff. And I started the graffiti art club at UVU.
How cool was that?
It's been awesome. It's been awesome. Street art, graffiti art. And so that was kind of how I started. And I failed out of college a couple of times. Went on an LDS mission down to the South America to Colombia. And like many, I kind of grew up and came back. And
was that the difference? You said failed out of school. Was it just kind of starting, stopping, not fully committing?
Part of it was just feeling like I wasn't college material. I really felt like I didn't have the aptitude. I wasn't smart enough. My brother and sister were both, really, really brilliant. I mean, they valedictorian, kind of both excelled, scholarships here or there. And I was the artist younger brother that was distracted. My mom was worried about, what I was gonna get involved in. And so, I would take college classes, and it just was like, I can't do this, and I would just go draw. And I do well in my one art class that I had in the semester. Right, my cumulative GPA after a few semesters of college was 0.68.
Wow.
Not even a 1.0, right? That means
you were totally disengaged.
Oh, yeah. That means you fail every class except the art class where I got a B, right?
And what are your parents thinking at this point? I think about, I've got 5 kids, and the oldest is 16. And she's actually, similar to what you're describing. She's an artist for sure.
Yeah.
And other aspects of school, she's just not interested.
Yeah.
And we're stressing, we're like, hey, you this matters. You got to get your math, and you got to get your, English, and you've got to, but for her, it's
the mindset. And again, every person's different, but I've worked with young people enough to know these generational mindsets. For us, the word that both has guided my role as an educator, but also what we're doing at UVU. And I know we'll get into that later, but it's the word relevance. To a 15 or 16-year-old right now, all of the stuff the parents are saying right now, and I don't care which the parent is. I mean, I've had kids, my own children grow up on the UVU campus, and then they come to me when they're 50 and like, Dad, did you know that we could do that? I'm like, I've been telling you that your whole life. There's something about, they equate relevance to what matters for them right now. It's a purpose-driven generation, right? So Gen Z, millennials are purpose-driven, crusade-driven, because they're introduced to so many crusades on social media. What we don't do a good enough job at in education, I would say this broadly in the K-12 system, is when students are like, look, this doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why I'm taking this class and this class and this class. Teacher quality matters. The teacher can either turn somebody on to a topic and get them excited about it, or they can just kill somebody's motivation. And what I would say is, and I don't know your daughter right now, but I would be happy to talk with her, is to say what matters to you, because what they want more than anything is to have their voice heard. For a graffiti artist, people have asked me, Kyle, why do you still do it? I want to create platforms where young people can have their voice heard. And frankly, for young artists who seem distracted, if they don't feel like there's a place for them in their school,
a space
for them and a place for them, they're going to go create their own space, and they're going to claim public space and say, I'm here. Here's my name. I'm here.
No, I'm hearing this and I'm just thinking of it through my personal experience that I'm living right now. But my daughter, she's in Europe with a friend, and she, sends us a message, and she's like, I'm going to dye my hair blue. And we're like, okay. But what I'm hearing is like, I really want attention. Like, notice me, and she's calling for it. And I think what you're describing is that it's like, all of us want to be seen.
Totally.
And all of us want to be accepted and included. And I know that's kind of been a lot of your life work.
Yeah.
And kind of where probably why UVU is having the success that they've had, or a lot of the success, is because it does feel like a place where people have a space.
Well, you're exactly right, Casey. I mean, there's been such overlap between my own personal journey and actually seeing students that remind me of me. Like I'll have parents call me and say, Kyle, can you just talk to my son or daughter? Right. And it could be in a school setting. It could be in a religious setting. It could be some other community setting. And I'm like, yeah, let's sit down and talk. Do you think
it's an empathy thing? Do you think it's just like, I've been that kid? Like sure. I know exactly where you're at.
Well, I think it's both. I think there's an empathy component that says, I know how you feel. But I also think that those who haven't necessarily even experienced that, I mean, people who have been successful and didn't fail out of college, they could also develop those lenses, right? And again, the book that I recently wrote, Lenses of Humanity, it's this, we can intentionally develop lenses to actually understand perhaps what somebody might be going through, even if we didn't live the same experience. So yeah, empathy is at the core of that.
But belief is poor substitute for an experience. Like I know for me, learning about something is way different than living it.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of found myself in the exact same boat. Like I was a low ACT guy, never finished college, didn't feel like I was smart enough. And, for me, I think about that parable of the sower.
Yep.
And seeds just getting spread a lot of different places. And I look back and I was like, I just landed on fertile soil. I had good mentors. I had a good company and was able to develop, but it took me longer. I think like I kind of came into my own as far as education, probably in my 30s, and it was going back to Harvard, and it was going and like almost like doing it a second time. A little more mature. But I think about these 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, and I'm like, the ones that are all A's and all like just have everything dialed, that wasn't me. I really admire them, but that definitely wasn't my journey.
Yeah, and nor is it mine. And I do think there's a certain level of inherent empathy that comes from that experience that we share, right? Where you and I could probably sit in front of a youth group and they can have all this in their mind and they're thinking, I'm not straight A. And you and I tell our story. And all of a sudden, remember, relevance. For them, it's like, somebody gets me. What's
funny is we always kind of put like these frames. I wouldn't have put you as a struggle through college guy. Like when I see you with a Matt Holland, or when I see you with an Astrid, or when I see you in a leadership role, it never feels like you ever struggled. Like you absolutely like
I appreciate that.
Demand a tremendous amount of respect. And also you kind of, you just have an energy that controls the room. And and so was that developed, or were those skills like always just in there?
Well, this is what I argue with my students I get to work with. I mean, I was a professor for 6 years in the School of Education, and I'd have students come up to me and be like, I don't have confidence. I don't have this. And I was like, I know exactly how that feels. One of the things that I think that I've stayed in higher education in a place like UVU is I actually believe most of this can be learned.
Yeah.
Most of it, right? And when I say most of it, let's be real. There are some things that become hardwired. I have 7 children. All of them hardwired differently, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But I want them to also know that skills can be developed. Confidence can be developed. For me, the key was people who entered my life, mentors at key moments. You named a couple of them, Matt Holland, Astrid Jimenez.
Yeah.
But I go farther back, right? People that were in my college days to help me learn my Polynesian dancing as a form of expression of telling my story. They were people who said, you have a story to tell and you have a unique way to tell it. And reframing my intelligence, instead of being like, Kyle, you stink at standardized tests, which was my narrative, it was like, you're an amazing artist. Go tell a story through your art. And there was something empowering about feeling like I actually not only had a story to tell, but I had the tools to tell it and that they were valued. That is a key.
If there's any common theme, and this is just me listening.
Yeah.
And that's been one of my favorite things about this podcast is you get to listen to stories. But if there's a common theme, it's almost universal.
Yeah.
Is that everybody has imposter syndrome. And everybody kind of in their own world says, I'm not enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not professional enough. I don't have enough contacts. I was with a guy last night, and this guy is, probably 100 millionaire, but definitely 50, plus. Older gentleman, made tremendous amount of money in real estate. And I was sitting down, I was talking to him, and he's 65, 70 years old. The very first thing that he says is, I always felt like I wasn't as smart or as good as these three groups that were these local, really great real estate groups.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here looking at this guy being like, you've ran the table for 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like incredible track record. But at 70, he's like a little kid, and you realize that those are human experiences, and those are like almost universal human
they are.
needs.
They are.
And I think you kind of identifying them and being able to speak to those, because most people it's unconscious. Like
Agreed.
you actually haven't
Agreed.
addressed
Agreed.
that I'm insecure about my ability to take standardized tests.
Mm-hmm.
And saying that out loud, like, is pretty empowering.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, you're speaking to something that, so some of my research and some of what I now, write about and speak about goes back to our psychology, unpacking the brain in all humans. I was UVU's first chief inclusion and diversity officer. And I know that's, taboo now to say things like that, but I'm like, wait, hold on. For me, this is not some woke agenda to be, to talk about and promote cultural understanding and understanding of difference. Because for me, every person that comes to the table, every student at UVU, every student that walks through our halls that took my class, they bring with them a certain set of scripts that they've been following, subconscious and conscious scripts that they've been following their whole lives about where they belong and where they don't belong. I'm a math person. I'm not a math person. I can write. I can't write. I'm shy. I'm an introvert, extrovert. We continually navigate these spaces. And what we do is we set ourselves up against other people and we start to make these assumptions, right, about what success looks like. And so these scripts that we carry with us, they really impact how we show up in the world. They impact our confidence to speak up in a room. They impact how we treat one another. They impact how we engage across lines of difference. And so that you're speaking to that imposter syndrome, which is only exacerbated, by the way, by social media, right? That imposter syndrome is rooted in our psyche because it's always about a comparison, right? It's always about, I see somebody that I want. And we never come across somebody that we're like, oh, there's not one thing I can improve upon based on my interaction with them. We see somebody and we're like, they've got something I don't have.
Comparison truly is the thief of joy, isn't it? Like you think about, but it's this two-edged sword because like I've benefited so much in my life being in rooms where I'm not the smartest person in the room or not the best athlete. And that comparison actually there is some good that comes from it, there's another level that you got to making you uncomfortable. And so I think there's like some really good things, but there's also some debilitating things where it like literally breaks your heart, specifically with kids. And I think for you've got your own kids, but then you've got 40,000 kids or like young people and I think UVU is just like so uniquely built to catch that group that has superpowers in art or superpowers but maybe like doesn't fit the traditional box as a majority. You know what I mean?
I do. And what I love that you use superpower in art or something like that, because In their minds, they think, okay, I have certain skills. I'm actually really good with people or whatever it might be. But being college material is still this like title that weighs heavily on people. And you mentioned 40,000 young people. That's true. But we also have 10 to 12,000 that are over the age of 25, right?
Yeah.
And I've had students in my class that were 52 coming back for the first time with imposter syndrome, right?
So cool.
And saying, oh, I don't know if I'm as smart as that 18-year-old that I'm sitting next to. And you're thinking, oh, bring all that life experience that you've had, because you're going to enrich that student's experience. And that student's going to enrich your life. And we become facilitators of that human connection, because they're going to learn more from each other than just a professor who just drones on, right?
So I'm jumping around all over the place, but go back to the mission. So you said that experience was transformative. Talk to me about those things, and it'll kind of tie into like a theme of leadership and what is good leadership. But talk to me, like, what was the difference?
For, again, whether it's somebody who's diagnosed with kind of ADHD or ADD, or somebody who is just distracted. For me, the only way I could process or listen to anything more than half an hour was to be drawing. So that was my own. And so school to me was like, let's just get through and let's do what we need to do. The mission, what it did was it just helped me focus, right? It helped me organize. It helped me make a plan. Artists, sometimes we don't make plans.
But was it discipline? Was it structure? Was it prescription drugs? Like, what was it that like all of a sudden you were able to harness it? Because that what it sounds like you're describing would be ADHD or you know, some ability to not be able to focus. Like, how did you harness it?
I think it was a series of mentors and frankly, just I don't know what else to say, but miracles. I mean, part of this is let me not discount the fact that in my own home, my mother and father, my mother was an educator, my father an artist. They were loving humans. And so I don't want to paint it like I was this distracted young teenager who didn't have direction and didn't have loving. My parents both provided a certain foundation that I just never appreciated or realized until I was in the country of Colombia. And all of a sudden somebody said, hey, I need you to, plan an activity or an event for this activity we're going to have. And I thought, great. And then I realized in those moments, when somebody challenged me to do something, there was a hunger inside of me. I played sports when I was younger. I played baseball, volleyball, and basketball. There's something about a challenge that I loved. Now, schooling was different, because schooling was, I had already resigned.
You never put it in that mindset.
Like, I didn't. It wasn't. There was something about a sports physical challenge that was exciting to me. An academic challenge wasn't exciting to me. It was just a different part of how I processed.
Crazy how you can just like compartmentalize.
Did that happen to you, by the way?
Of course. Like I can go back and I think about specifically about religion. And there was pieces of religion that I always had like a faith about different pieces. And there was other pieces that I was just like completely dismissive of. And I hadn't like taken the time to like actually realize they've got to like work together. So that like there's one piece like, that I was just like, yeah, I'm completely on board with this. And there was another piece that I was like, don't want anything to do with that. And they were the same thing. But it took me a little while to actually like look at the whole. And I think what you're describing is that it's like in athletics, I could focus. I could compete. I could lead. But all of a sudden you just never were able to like put those same principles into education. It was almost like it was just check out. Which is fascinating to me.
Well, and then on the mission, what you're doing is you're layering kind of this, your physical activities that you're doing, but you're layering in this kind of new spiritual analysis that I never took seriously before. I did it from a very let's just go through the motions. But in terms of somebody then on the street challenging me and being like, you don't know what you believe. And I'm like, well, hold on. Do I know what I believe? Like, and then all of a sudden it became this, not a competition, but it became this personal challenge to say, I better know what I believe.
Go figure it out.
I better figure this out. Those moments of being challenged, being pushed to get out of my comfort zone, it is where the biggest growth moments happen. And for all of us, we grow at the edge of our comfort zone.
So you go on a mission, have a great mission. Who was the leader on your mission that believed in you more than you believed in yourself?
Oh, I'd say a couple of missionaries, other missionaries as well. But really my mission presidents. I mean, that's pretty cliche, but they were so different. One of them that the first one I had, he brought me into the office pretty early to be his secretary. I didn't even speak Spanish that well, but he brought me in. So for 6 months, I was in the office, and I was there as part of the transition to the new mission president, who was from Colombia, the first one from the United States, and the second one coming in, and him looking and saying, Elder Reyes, I need your help to know what I'm supposed to do as a mission president. I thought,
Wow.
what? What? I've been in 6 months, or 6 months. I don't know. And he's like, no, I need you to guide me on what, me and other missionaries that were in the office. And so there was these moments of stepping up to responsibility, but it was almost like before the mission, I would shut out opportunities to take responsibility. It was like, oh, that's just too much work, or I know I'm not going to like it. On the mission, there was something about every time an invitation would come to take on a leadership role or a responsibility or this or that, it felt like this personal growth opportunity that I just was like, you know what? I didn't come out here to just fill up space. Like, I came out here to grow. And so it was a mindset shift. I embraced opportunities to grow differently than before.
Go on the mission, obviously life-changing.
Yeah.
And like, I think it's kind of, I don't want to say it's cliche, because they're like, my mission was life-changing. It changed the course of my life.
Yeah.
Like, any kid that's coming and asking me like, hey, am I giving up time? Or like, all I can just say is, like, personal experience, it changed my life.
Oh, completely.
Fundamentally, I was on one track and it put me on a different track, and that track is way better, you know? And so I think, just from like a side note, it's fun to hear the difference between failing out of college to coming back as like a bona fide leader. And so, like, what was post mission? Because you spent your career in education, so you go from fail through it to writing books and teaching in college. Like, what was that shift?
Again, it's hard to point to any one moment, but I will say there were these various moments. So post mission, get back with a new set of lenses. I don't know how else to describe it, but I looked at the world differently. I had different filters by which I interpreted the world around me. Not only did I speak another language, I had an appreciation for a different culture. And I started to say to myself, I spent every day planning my life. Why would it be any different now that I'm back? Let me make a plan. And so I did.
So you never stopped.
No. I came back and I made a bucket list, which I still have to this day, of like 200 life goals. And I think I'm up to like 90 of them that I've worked on. And I just kind of chip away at it. Some of them audacious, right? Huge goals. But others I'm like, well, we'll see, and I've chipped away at that. When I got back, a mentor of mine said, Kyle, you failed out before your mission, all these college. You have all these negative credits, like credits of fail grades, right? They said, start over, test out of Spanish, take classes that you are passionate about. So I took Introduction to Creativity as a general education class. I started taking these classes, and then somebody said, you should join this multicultural dance group. So I started dancing and learning the dances of my heritage. And all of a sudden there was something that I tapped into.
So you never knew those growing up?
No, because partly it's growing up in Southern California. Most of my friends were, Hispanic, Latino, right? As a Hawaiian Pacific Island, Asian Pacific Islander, Hawaiian, Japanese, Filipino, we interacted with my cousins and stuff like that. But as far as learning the dances, the songs of my heritages, it wasn't until college. And all of a sudden, giving this platform and yet another platform to tell my story and to learn my heritage and to find out who I am and be proud of that, and then to make connections with my parents, and then to take life seriously.
Dude, how special is that? Like, your story is so unique. I think about Asian Pacific parents going to Colombia on a mission.
Yeah.
You just are going to see the world differently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you living in Southern California and then coming to Utah, like, you're just like uniquely qualified to have a more holistic view. That is your life.
And my wife is Navajo. She's from the Navajo reservation. So my kids are Hawaiian, Filipino, Japanese, and Navajo. And we're in the Provo, Utah, right? Or we're in Utah County, right? We live in Vineyard now. Side note, and I just have to throw this in, and whether you keep this in or not, it is a side note, and I don't typically just kind of offer this up, but just as a bridge for the mission. I have the privilege of serving right now in a stake in Provo. It's a multicultural stake. It's a Utah Valley Deaf Ward, ASL Ward, Haitian Creole branch, Native American Ward, 2 Spanish wards, and 5 boundary wards. So I'm the stake president of a Provo stake that has a multicultural lens. What that has meant to me is to interact and learn a few signs for sign language, right? Because I love this community. To learn a few words in Haitian Creole because I love this growing community. To connect with this Native American congregation that my wife has been a part of, and all of those that have been a part of 30 tribes and nations throughout the United States that are now in Provo attending this unique branch or ward. It's kind of a full circle thing, right? Learning my cultural dances, getting more exposure to cultural difference in college before meeting Michelle, right? Before meeting my wife. And then now 20 years later, being able to serve in that way has been such an awesome experience.
Legitimately, it's blowing my mind. I'm thinking, like, I remember growing up in a predominantly white small town up in Cache Valley.
Yeah.
And we would have, some Polynesian friends and some African American friends, but for the most part, it was Caucasian.
Sure.
And small town. Yeah. And you couple those two things and you're just grew up ignorant. And then I went on my mission and it was Spanish speaking in Oklahoma. And my entire mission was predominantly immigrants and a lot of illegal immigrants. And it was so fascinating for me to see my lens or my worldview just completely change. And my empathy level completely change on what it's like to live in America as a dreamer, as an illegal immigrant. And I had like these interesting views on, coming across the border.
Sure.
I kind of hard views.
Sure.
And I remember going out there and just being like, I was just wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm serving with these people that are like, leading their congregation and then working 50, 60 hours a week in construction, and really grateful for the work because it's 5 to 7 to 10 times more than they could make in Michoacan or wherever they're at. And there was one guy in particular, that he was the branch president, had this amazing family, would just like, he carried like this entire community on his back, working full time. And his kids would literally have to cross the border to go to Mexico to get a mission call. They couldn't get a mission call in the U.S. And I'm sitting here being like, that is so unjust. Like, this is like, and he wasn't complaining. It's just me like sitting here going. And so it's like, it's so interesting to go have those experiences. The other experience that I had that fundamentally changed me was I went to Harvard and the MBA program, it's probably predominantly US based, majority of the people, but the executive educations is predominantly global.
Yeah.
And 85% of my cohorts were all from all over the world. And so I'm here with people from every corner of the world and every religion and, sexual preference and all these things. And they're the best people in the world. But it took me experiencing it to see them. You know what I mean? And so like what you're describing, even as this stake president in this role, is like, it fires me up because I think about just like that human experience of seeing people and meeting them where they're at and how much it means to all of us to be seen and like just to like realize like, hey, you matter.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately, like when you're doing that, like you're touching the divine, like you really are like on like hallowed ground.
Yeah. Agreed. First of all, thanks, Casey, for sharing such a personal thing, because it's hard for us to admit sometimes whenever, and I'm going to bring back this word, right? Diversity. Right now, it's such a polarizing topic. And even there might be people that listen to this right now who are like, oh, let's not hear that again. We live in such a time where it's been such a weaponized word for various agendas. But at its core, and what drives me to serve the students at UVU, what drives me is that they are somebody's child out there.
For sure.
or they're somebody's mom who's coming back to school, and they're a human being, and they deserve our attention, they deserve our commitment, and they deserve to be treated as a dignified human.
Yeah.
And so when somebody comes, that's first generation, first in their family to go to college, like we have 37% of UVU students first in their family, 14,000 that will be the first to graduate from college. For me, that is a commitment to them and their generations to follow. To dignify the human experience is to provide the tools for them to become the authors of their own stories, to provide them the platform to say, because you took this class, or because you had this experience, because you did a study abroad, because you had this internship, you cannot see the world the same again. You have fundamentally shifted your worldview, and we have been a part of that journey. Oh, and by the way, go take that new knowledge and go bless the world. Go make an impact.
It truly is so special. And like when you're saying like, hey, diversity and inclusion, all that stuff, it's a trigger. It's a trigger for me.
Yeah.
I hear it and like kind of don't like it.
Yeah.
Just because of extremes.
Sure.
You know, everything taken to extremes. Like, but I would say like all people, when you really boil it down to like the fundamentals of like seeing people and loving people. And like, I'd probably say 99% of us see the world the same way.
Yeah.
It's language that kind of creates the triggers and stuff like that. But when you really boil down to the human experience, all of us, when we're with somebody and we serve them, we spend time with them, we love them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I think those are the things that's like, in specifically, you know, in a election year and like a polarizing environment.
Yeah.
I think taking a step back from that and like looking what you're doing is like serving people and creating an opportunity for them to go live the American dream. When I think about like, what is the American dream? Is that you can come here and you can change your station in life. Yeah. That you're not predetermined, that like, and most of it flows through education. Like ignorance is what damns us and stops us and like halts our progress. And to be able to like help people get unstuck, it's got to be like the most fulfilling career. Like you've got to just like look back and just say like, I'm so proud of what I do. And also like, I'm so grateful to be able to do what I do.
Well, definitely the second part. I'm just extremely grateful that, and the other thing I want to say is I have such great colleagues and partners at all the other universities in the state of Utah. I will call them up and say, hey, we're sending a student your way. Take care of them, right? Because you have the major that we don't, right?
Of course.
And so while I bleed green through and through, and I will promote UVU everywhere, I just want people to go get more education and experience that's relevant to them.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's a tech college or a university or some post high school training. Because again, when you talk about the American dream, I would just add to that something that I just said, and that is, for me, it's whether it's the American dream or just a global dream, it's that everybody feels dignified in their human existence, right? That everybody feels like, whether they live in France or wherever, that somebody sees their humanity and they don't make assumptions and they get to know their story first before they start putting them in certain groupings or tribes.
Which is so hard,
right?
It's almost impossible. It's so hard. All of us like do it.
We do.
Like not even trying to, we do it because it's easier. It's more efficient. Yeah. Like it's way more efficient to group people than to actually see them as an individual. You know what I mean? Like when I'm out of line, I'm efficient in just categorizing somebody and putting a label. And it actually allows me to spend less time getting to know that person or like leaning in. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And we're hardwired for that. We're hardwired for comfort, safety, and efficiency. So it's no wonder that our brains automatically kick in to say, it's so much easier for me to navigate the world instead of saying at every person I meet, I have to spend 30 minutes to learn their story. So we navigate.
One of my mentors was over at his house last night, Todd Peterson. And
awesome.
If he has a superpower, and I watched this for 20 years now, it's that he can see people.
Oh, Todd's amazing.
As a person. And he gets so interested in the individual. Yeah. And I've always just admired this so much. Yeah. Like my nature, I go into like productivity and efficiency mode. And what doesn't fit in productivity and efficiency mode is meeting people where they're at. Yeah. Like it's completely inefficient. And somehow he's been able to do it where we sat down yesterday for 4 hours and I was supposed to be there for a half hour. And somehow he's figured out that like slow is fast and fast is slow, and that the right amount of time with an individual is as much time as it takes for that person to be heard. And it, like, I admire it, and I admire people who do that. And I don't want to say it's hard for me, because I like getting stuff done.
Sure.
And people get in the way a lot of the times, you know what I mean? And so anyway, going completely off topic.
Oh, you're fine. Like, by the way, Todd's been a great, I mean, he's Dr. Todd Peterson, because we gave him an honorary doctorate a number of years ago, and he's been such a supporter and somebody that, he and Andy, they've just, when you talk about people who lift the community.
He didn't want the honorary though. He wanted the real one. He wanted you to remove the honorary.
So I'll call him after this. I'll call him. We'll have to sit down and lunch. But I mean, again, people can say, oh yeah, we see this name here and we see this. We're talking about lifting the community, using our, whatever resources we have at any level. Are we doing our part to lift humanity, lift the community? And anyway, so that's a good mentor.
So talk to me about that next phase, from going from I'm on fire, I'm a student, to I'm going to go lead out in education.
Yeah. So coming back, I finished a degree in graphic design and went to work at New Skin. So I was in a design intern at New Skin in 2003. Loved it. Nothing to say about New Skin as a company. When I was sitting there, I would sit in my cubicle designing packaging for a company that already had their look and feel, right? New Skin's logo, great company. But as far as the design went, I was just like, I feel like I just need to put the same logo on, the same packaging, same colors.
Of course.
And I remember thinking, what was I passionate about? The previous 3 years doing cultural dancing and traveling throughout the United States, dancing Polynesian dances, Latin dances, and all these things for young people. I remember visiting a reservation, a Native American reservation down in Arizona, and we performed and we finished the show, and then the kids all run up to us to get like autographs. I mean, it's crazy, right? And they come up running up to us. And I remember one young man coming up to me, and I was still in my my attire, my cultural attire, and I was like, "What's your name?" And we were talking, and he's like, if I go to college, can I dance in this group? And I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, what do you love? Like, what do you love to do? And he's like, I like to draw. And I'm like, get out of here. I'm like, high five. I'm like, I love to draw. And I said, do me a favor, just draw something for me right now. How about this? You draw something, I'll draw something. We'll give it to each other. That exchange that we spent for about a half an hour with this one young man on this Native American reservation, I had so many of those experiences. And so as I was sitting there in my cubicle, and all of a sudden I said, I think I want a career doing that. And I remember reaching out to a mentor, and I said, how do I switch to education? My mom was an educator my whole life, so it's not like I'm a stranger to it, but I don't know if I really have what it takes to be an educator. And he said, go to UVSC, talk to my friend. This is 2003, summer of 2003. She runs a program that helps low income and first generation students reimagine themselves to go to college. I was like, that's awesome. I went and visited her. It was a Pacific Islander Fijian woman named Mariah Weingarten. Her son, Mike Weingarten, played baseball for many years. Mikey and Ayana, the whole family there. So Mariah was there. She's like, oh, welcome. She goes, well, I don't have any money to pay you, but you could volunteer after your job at New Skin. Come and volunteer in the summer each evening and just be a mentor to these kids. I was like, done. So I'd work at New Skin. After hours, I'd go to UVSC. And I would just go talk to these kids.
It was like calling to you. Like
it was.
There was something that was just like literally calling.
The energy.
Yeah.
I would spend all day designing, looking forward to the last 3 hours of the day. Wow. So then here's what happens. Do that for 2 months. We come into August of 2003. I'm about to get married at the end of August to Michelle of 2003. And she says to me, hey, I have an offer for you. Another woman that's in this program, she literally came up to me and said, it's about time for me to retire anyway. I will give up my job for that kid.
What?
So we want to know if you want a full-time job for $23,000 a year. You quit New Skin, you come over and work for us. Now it's not much, but it's a foot in the door. It's plus benefits. I'm like, $23,000 a year. I'm about to get married. Done. And on September 8th, 8 days after I got married, I started my first job at Utah Valley State College as an outreach coordinator, visiting high schools and at junior highs all throughout the state of Utah, telling young kids whose parents never went to college that they actually had what it took to go to college. And then that went and then master's degree and then PhD. And 8 jobs later now, I've been there 21 years, but the message has been the same for 21 years is, can I authentically communicate to a young person or a not so young person that they have what it takes to be successful in a college environment because they get to dictate how they want this to go. And so for so many people, it's just a mindset shift. It is somebody planting the seed to say, Casey, I know you might have been distracted in high school. Let's shift some things here. What do you want to get out of your college experience? Let's go help create that. And by the way, I've noticed that you're really good at sports. How about you join this club over here? Let's find community. Let's find mentors. Let's find a connection. That puzzling together, the support system for my students, is one of the most exhilarating things I can do as an educator.
You've got to be so proud.
It's fun, man.
Like, of your career. Like, I think about, like, when you're on your deathbed. Seriously, I shouldn't think about this.
No. I think about that too.
I think about it a lot. And I think about, like, I had this conversation with our neighbors last night.
Yeah.
And, like, I love business.
Yeah.
And I love doing deals.
Yeah.
And I probably love it too much. And, like, I've got my kids out playing, and my boys are 2 and 4.
Yeah.
And my neighbor has just been a fantastic coach of kids. And I'm not. And I'm like, I need to allocate more time serving my kids. Like, I need to. And I'm going through this conversation, but so much of that is driven of, like, what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about your career, and somehow you found this sweet spot of, like, being able to make a living.
Yeah.
Doing what you would do for free.
Yeah.
And that's like incredible. You know what I mean? And it feels like it's compounding. It feels like all the work you've done the last 20 years has prepped you for this moment to go make the biggest impact in the future. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about, like, and there's a couple of key leaders that I know both me and you both really revere that I want to kind of see how they fit in your journey. But talk to me about the future. When you look at the future and, like, what your vision is for how to, when you said, hey, this is the beautiful life that I want to go live, what does that look like?
Yeah. Such a great question, man. You Casey, it's no wonder you're connecting with so many people. You ask really good questions. I've gotten to a point where I really am trying to enjoy the journey and not be like, oh, when the next thing happens, you know. So as far as the beautiful life, I feel like what we're living now, Michelle and me and the 7 kids and UVU, is beyond what I could have ever dreamed.
Yeah.
So that I'm starting there. That said, is, you know, you want to grow and you want to, you know, and so part of the next chapter, so to speak, of influence and growth of influence for me is just is actually having the courage enough to put some thoughts down on paper, and the release of this book next month has been a 5 to 10 year journey for me to actually say, to work through that imposter syndrome, and actually say, I know I'm not a writer, but I have some thoughts. And so in the next 20, years, I'm 45. So you could say 20 years of a career or whatever it might be. I really want to zero in on, with this book plus influencing people to just be more humanity driven overall, whether that's business, whatever the industry, and to really lean into more kind of paying it forward in terms of mentoring and coaching.
Of course,
that those younger professionals, the me 20 years ago who is like, I think I want a career in education, but I'm not sure. I will say that over the last 20 months in this new role at UVU, I've been able to connect with just amazing people that I may not have before. And I'm starting to realize.
Because your role is more senior?
No, I mean, again,
what do you think it is?
Yeah, before that, I was the vice president of student affairs, and that was making sure that all the students were, got taken care of outside the classroom. So admissions, financial aid, all the services.
Yep.
In this role as vice president of institutional advancement and, fundraising, alumni relations, the nature of the job is just, I'm out there more. I'm out connecting with people more and telling the story of UVU, but also listening. I mean, I think that you said you love to listen. I love to learn about why people are passionate about certain things.
Yeah.
And if there's something at UVU that connects with their passion, wonderful. If not, I respect that. And there's a lot of things that I support outside the university. But for me, over the next couple of decades, I really want to shift to, my oldest son is on a mission right now. My youngest daughter is 7 years old. I have 6 kids this next school year going to 4 different schools. Michelle has her 2 businesses that she's running. We've got church service, launching this book. We do graffiti art. I design shoes on the side for people that are my thank you notes as I design them a pair of shoes. I have all these little outlets, and maybe that's how I stay focused, is I have all these other distractions that I kind of keep and hear, but then it allows me to say and keep showing up for the job in the way I do. The future of UVU is so bright. I hope we have President Tuminez as long as she's willing to be there. And but I will also say that there will be a day where she is no longer the president, and the next president will take it to another direction, and the next. And so a lot of the things that we are building here, I don't just see as building for next year or the next 2 years. I mean, we're building for the next 4 or 5 decades of changing the game in higher education. So Michelle, I want to support her in her businesses. She's such a remarkable human. And she's lifting the community.
What does she do in those businesses?
Yeah, so she's a makeup artist right now with a company called Saint. She's also launched her own life coaching business. She runs her own podcast called In Every Thought that she runs with my sister and another friend of theirs to reframe kind of how we show up and processing feelings and thoughtfulness and mindfulness work.
Yeah.
So anyway, so many things that are fun. But for me, I think I can answer it more succinctly by saying this. Somebody asked me recently, a publishing house a year ago said, "Who's your audience for this book that you're about to launch? Lenses of Humanity. Who's your audience?" And I said, "Well, kind of everybody." And they're like, "No, you can't say that. You got to choose an audience so that we know where to put it on the Barnes and Noble shelf." And I was like, okay. And I thought about it, and I came back to them and I said, this may be a cop-out, but my audience is my children. And they're like, what? And I said, I honestly don't care. I don't care who reads it. But one day I want every one of my children and grandchildren to know what I stood for. This book is going to get torn up. It's not radical enough for the left. It's too radical for the right. It's a book about empathy and cultural understanding along lines of difference. It's how to engage in more healthy ways when we disagree with people. It's a practical book that says we can do better for humanity. When I die, it's coming back to your deathbed. When I die, I don't believe that I will have wished that I spent more hours at the office. I don't believe I would have wished I had, done more for my business or brand. I will want to have looked at every one of my kids and grandkids and be like, do you know what I stood for my whole life? And that they can say, well, I read your book, Dad or Grandpa. And if you walked what you actually talked, then we know what you stood for. And hopefully that there's congruency with what I say and how they've actually seen me live. That's our hope as parents, right?
So go back to Matt Holland.
Yeah.
He's a guy that I've always had tremendous respect for. And I know you guys kind of were tag team.
Yeah.
And you had kind of a front row seat on his leadership style. What did you learn from Matt?
Matt is what I call, to other people that are in our orbit of that era, he's an ever-present shoulder angel. People don't forget, when he became president, he was 43. I became his chief of staff when I was 31.
You guys were young.
So here you have a 43-year-old president and a 31-year-old chief of staff. And we're looking at each other like, all right, well, let's go learn together, right?
How fun to be able to have like fresh eyes to go attack it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He was somebody from day one who was, we talk about congruency with who you are and consistency, no matter where you are, shopping in Walmart, showing up, speaking at a church function, showing up as the president of a university, speaking to students. He had this innate ability to connect and have every person in the room feel like they are being seen and heard, right? You talked about Todd Peterson having that gift. Matt Holland in spades had that. The other piece that I learned from him was to always keep things in a perspective. When people would come to him with a crisis, he would just, let's gather information. Let's make the best decision. There are things that are much more crises, that are actual crises in the world. This is not a crisis. It's a problem we can solve. There was an unflappableness about him that I was like, when I was stressing for him, and I was over there behind the scenes as a 31-year-old young professional, like, President, we got to figure this out. And he's like, we'll get there. There was an unflappableness to him which instilled a certain confidence that no matter what came at us, no matter what external force, a dip in the economy, the missionary age change, which affected enrollments all across the state of Utah, all of these different hiccups, that he just kind of said, we got this. Okay. We've got really smart people around us. It's a problem to figure out. We can go figure this out. And I've really tried to take that in my leadership through some really stressful times, right? COVID and other things where people are like, we've got to make a decision. I said, we will, right? And I'm channeling my inner Matt Holland on that. And then just his authentic love for people.
So I think about that age that you were and the age that he was, and that had to have been such a gift from God in your life.
Yeah.
To be able to have somebody a decade older.
Yeah.
That somebody that you look up to and aspire to be like, that you get to work with in that intimate of a setting.
Yeah.
And just who you become because of that. I think about how much my career changed from having Alex Dunn and Todd Peterson as same thing, 10 to 15 years older, just exceptional leaders. And to see how they manage crisis, to see how they make human decisions, people decisions, hiring, firing, strategic decisions.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was like this masterclass that I got to, that's where I look back and I'm just like, man, there's so much luck factors, there's got to be like something bigger at play, because like that was just, for me, it was just this gift. It was not a choice of my own. I just ended up there,
Yeah.
And I think about a Matt Holland for you, and it's like, who gets that? Who gets that opportunity to go work with a 43-year-old superstar that's running a university? Like,
right.
It just doesn't happen.
It doesn't
anywhere.
It was this gift that I love that term. And let me just share one quick story about Matt that I think this might be the first time it's been publicly shared, but I think it embodies his entire presidency. We would work late hours, especially the first 3 years. We'd stay there very late. And I remember one time I was about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. We're finishing up a board of trustee meeting. And I'm wrapping up things in the office and I knock on the door. He's like, come in. And I walk in, I say, President, you need anything else before I go? And he's in his chair and he's just in tears. And I immediately just kick into like, what's going on? Like, what do I need to do? Like, right. And so I said, President, you okay? And he's like, yeah, sit down. And he's reading something. And I'm silent and I'm worried. I'm just worried at this point. And he just finishes and he kind of wipes away his tears and he's like, sorry about that. And he just said, he across his desk, he slides the card across the desk. And he said, in your career, if you stay in education and when times get hard, I want you to remember what you're about to read. And now I'm intrigued, right? And so I pick up the card and I'm looking at it. It's front, it's at the top and bottom, and then kind of goes on to the back a little bit. We run out of room. And I'm reading. It's a student that says, President Holland, you may not remember me, but you took me to lunch a few weeks ago. I need you to know that day I was contemplating taking my life. Running into you, having you buy me lunch, and then having you remember my name meant the world to me. Here's my story. And they go into their story. And they said, I'm a believer that people come into our lives for a reason. You came into my life at the right time. If you run UVU like you handled, you took care of me that day, I will forever be loyal to UVU and what UVU has to offer. She said, again, you don't have to remember me. You don't have to. He pens a note back to her and says, make sure this gets to the right person, right? But he's sitting there and I give it back to him and now I'm in tears. And I say, President, thank you for sharing that with me. And he said, don't you ever forget. This is why we do what we do. He takes it and puts it in a file. And I learned that he has this file that he probably still has, even with his new responsibilities up there in Salt Lake. He has it's called a good news file. And it's all these thank you cards from his former students.
Wow.
Where when life gets hard, he just goes there and reminds himself, this is why I do what I do. what people didn't see behind the scenes was for all of his amazing presence out in the community and his communication and his strategy and his relationships. What they didn't see is at the end of the day, every night and every morning, his first thought was, help me take care of these students. These are my students. And he was emotionally invested in every one of those students.
No, he really was. And I think that was, why so endeared to him.
Yeah.
Because he was just all in.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to like sit in your office and kind of disconnect.
Yeah.
And I think even it's talking about the themes of your book and like connecting with humanity.
Yeah.
And it was just an example of it. I revere people like that. And I was nervous when he was leaving.
Yeah.
Cause I was like,
we all were.
Man, those are like big shoes to fill. And this guy, I think he absolutely leveled up the university. And then when they hired Astrid, I was so intrigued. I didn't know anything about her. You're hearing the story. And I mean, she's for sure on this podcast. She's my favorite podcast that we've ever done.
Yeah.
And she just lights me up. She inspires me. Like I'm sitting here listening to her story and I'm just like, you inspire me. You fire me up.
Yeah.
Like how you pursue life and how you she almost has like this childlike passion.
Oh,
that almost comes across as like naive. But then you look at her foundation and you're like, she's the smartest person
in every room.
but she makes you feel like the smartest person. I'm just like, you are incredible. And me and Chelsea just admire her so much.
Agreed.
Talk to me about the difference in their leadership styles and also like what you've learned from both.
Yeah. So if Matt is on one shoulder, Astrid's on another shoulder. And you talk about a contrast in styles, talk about a contrast in life stories and approaches to things, but such complementary styles in terms of what UVU needed at its different stages.
Yeah.
Right. Perfect Matt Holland for that time. Astrid Jimenez. I mean, there is no doubt, right? She was the person that needed to lead us into this. I mean, let alone COVID and technology and all these things that she brings. So some key lessons that I've learned from President Jimenez. Number one is what you said is, at first you're like, is it a naivete? Is it something? And you're like, no, but she's like the smartest person in the room. There is a genuine curiosity.
I think that's the word.
That is from her childhood. And when we went back to the Philippines with a number of key supporters and board members and donors this last January, we went and visited her hometown. And you saw people just throng her with just people coming up. Oh, Astrid. And you could see the young Astrid come out again. She was in her home turf. And there was this genuine curiosity, this fire. And everybody was like, oh, she's been like that since she was 6.
Wow.
She's been like that since she was 4. She was asked questions. She'd ask questions. And so her asking questions or her vigor for life, it might come across as, she's just untethered in this way. It's this curiosity.
Honestly, it's intoxicating.
She wants to learn about everything. Oh, and by the way, she is sprinting to it, right? And so the energy around UVU is higher education has this horrible tradition and horrible reputation of just moving at a glacial pace.
Yeah.
Right? And at some level we still do. But UVU, and I'm hoping this is authentic to the partners who've engaged with us, as far as higher ed goes,
it's extremely disruptive.
We move pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with President Jimenez's energy and her vision to be disruptive, to say, oh, I don't care if other universities take 6 months to do that. We're going to do it in 2 weeks. And our team is like, I don't know if we can. She's like, I think you can. Go for it. That belief has completely changed my mindset. She's the one who challenged me to write this book.
Wow.
So 6 years ago, she said, I need you to go write this book. I know you've got thoughts. I've heard about your reputation. I think you've got something to say. And so, I have her to thank for actually completing this thing. So she has a way of challenging people without, sometimes it's directly, but her presence, speaking 6 languages, the breadth of her knowledge, her ability to pivot and slam the mat for a wrestling match at UVU and to go talk with a dignitary in Russian, go translate in French, come back and speak to the legislature, and then speak with a donor, and then give a faculty address. Unmatched.
No, man,
unmatched.
I've never seen anything like it.
And it's inspiring.
Like the thing that lights me up the most about her is her ability to be bad at something. Like she has all these stages in her career where she rises to the top.
Yeah.
And then she starts at the bottom
Of something
and
else.
works her way up. Whether it's like I'm studying Russian and then I transition into finance, or I'm doing philanthropy work and I transition into the business world and like kind of corporate politics and like all the knives that come with it.
Yep.
And then to say, you know what, I'm actually going to go into education. And I just I truly do like admire so much. And I think about even you, like, and this is just some feedback. I've known you for a long time.
Yeah.
And you've always had leadership skills, but I've seen you in this role develop. And the last time that we met, I was just like, you're like a bona fide leader. Like the university's like lucky to have you at this point. Like you've I think this is your moment, and so it's so fun. And you've got to attribute some of that to just the people that you've been able to learn from.
Hands down. It is a combination of mentors and miracles. It's a combination of Michelle as my key partner in this entire journey. It frankly is, it's the students. It's people like you who continue to give us platforms to tell the story. That's very kind of you, Casey. I will say I've developed such a hunger that's been stoked by Matt Holland and Astrid Jimenez and a host of others.
Yeah.
Who by their very nature, but also by their coaching, they've been intentional about mentoring me too, right? It's not like this, oh, if Kyle finds his way, great. President Jimenez said, I need you to take over, this fundraising area. Oh, and by the way, I think you need to grow in that area, and I'm going to give you a challenge.
Wow.
Right? She's watching out for my own growth and development, just like she is with so many others. So no, I feel so fortunate to interact with them.
We're out of time.
Yeah.
But I want to kind of wrap with a question that I always end with, which is talk to me about faith.
Yeah.
So, and how it fits in the whole picture. You talked about, your ecclesiastical role as a leader, in a very diverse congregation.
Yeah.
But talk to me about faith and how that's kind of how you think about it and how it fits in the journey.
Gosh, this is such a big question to end with. And I have so many directions I could take it, but let me start by saying this. I'm in a turn. My father, his immigration story is pretty unique, but I'll just say this. He was an Elvis impersonator. He was larger than life. He was an artist, a fine artist. He was a storyteller, entertainer, but more than anything, he was an optimist. He was an eternal optimist. My mom was the realist. She was the one that's like, we got to pay the bills. We got to make sure we take care of things. And if you want to go back to the shoulder angels that are there, they both passed away. I tell people I'm a 51%er. And what I mean by that is I recognize a lot of the crud that's happening in our world. I recognize some of the injustices and inequities, but I choose to show up on the positive side of the optimism ledger, right? Because by showing up, I'm saying to people, I actually have hope that we can make a difference. There is something about faith for me that I just invite people to just show up. Whether that's showing up for your children that says, I have faith in you, I'm going to keep showing up for you. That's showing up for your partner and spouse, I have faith in you. And showing up for whatever your God is, for whatever your deity is. I served on an interreligious faith panel in Chicago for 2 years. And so Buddhist, Sikh, Seventh-day Adventist, secular humanist, Pentecostal, atheist, we would get together and we would just share. And we had more in common with each other than differences. And what I would say is whoever that God is for you, whoever that deity is for you, just show up for them. Find out what it means to show up for them. And for me, in my inadequacies and in my weaknesses, I know as long as I show up for the people that I'm meant to serve, something good can happen. If I show up for my God, the person that I believe in or the deity I believe in, I believe he's going to give me opportunities to grow, and he's going to give me opportunities to serve. And here's the thing. I almost don't care what happens after I show up. We know that whether it's a business meeting, it's for our students in class, it's for our kids at their baseball game, showing up is half of it right there. Then once you show up, the magic happens. And when it comes to faith, if I can keep showing up in the way that I need to show up with my own personal faith practices, if I show up to church and the various worship services that I believe in, I think miracles can happen. And so on those days when anybody that's listening to this, or on those days when I don't feel like showing up, I ask myself, okay, challenge yourself to be faithful to that thing. For UVU, I'm going to show up. For my religion, I'm going to show up. I will end with this. You mentioned your kids, and you got emotional as you talked about your kids. There's nothing, there is no award, there's no title that I can get that would feel better than my kids actually deeply and authentically feeling that they know that I've got their back 100%.
Yeah.
No matter what they choose in life, no matter what down the road, religiously, orientation, whatever it might be, whatever they choose in life, that they know that I am in their corner 100%. That to me is where I measure my success.
No, I love it. Brother, you got a beautiful story.
Thank you.
I truly, it's not lip service when I tell you, I think your best days are in the future and not in the past.
I appreciate it.
I think everything that you've been building on is kind of setting you up for the next stage of the journey. And I just think it's needed more than ever before, that process of, helping people get the dignity and the skills to be economically self-reliant and to believe in them when they don't believe in themselves. I just think it's spiritual work. I think it's really, really special. And I'm pulling, and I love the work that you guys are doing at UVU. I'm always cheering for all your wins. And so anyway, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it, Casey.